A lot of organizations, there's not very strong connections. What's important to them is their image, and they'll protect that image at all costs.
Today I have Stephanie Costigan with me, and it's time we discuss what it's really like being a reporter and author. Stephanie, thank you for joining me today.
Hi.
I haven't spoken to any reporters yet, in real life or on the show, so this is kind of exciting. What is it really like being a reporter on the day to day?
It's a mix. You never know what you're gonna get. Every story's different, and sometimes you see some really, oh, how can I say it, conniving things behind the scenes.
Okay, I'm assuming there are different types of reporters. I've heard of investigative journalists, reporters. If someone wants to be a quote unquote reporter, like what are different areas they can explore?
I think reporting's changing, to be honest. Like before, the traditional reporting is not quite the same. Like nowadays, like before, you didn't actually need any studies to be a reporter. You just needed experience. And that's what they value. Even the industry now, I believe they value experience more than schooling, from what I've been told. Um, and you can go and do schooling for it. The schooling's different than it used to be. It's not just focused on reporting, it's also focused on marketing because nowadays marketing and reporting has become blended together. So you have to know both. You have to market yourself in a sense, or the news outlet that you represent. And social media is a big contributor to that. So that's why we need to know a lot. We also learn a little bit of laws and ethics for, like, for example, slander. We don't want to get sued for slander, so we learn a lot about that. We learn about the code of ethics for journalists. But yeah, journalists seem to be, at least in Canada, kind of a dying breed, which is really sad. Journalism is really turning into a communications job, which is kind of scary and sad. It's a transition. Like for journalism, it's kind of under attack because, like, traditionally, journalism, you're not supposed to have a political point of view. You're supposed to balance it out. Like, you're supposed to report in such a way that no one can tell who you're actually leaning towards. But nowadays, we see that has shifted. There is a change where definitely certain news outlets definitely lean more towards a left or right? So that's actually leaving journalism, which is, I don't know. I personally think it's a little scary because, how can you report without a bias?
As a reporter or as a journalist, how tightly connected is that role with like a PR professional in another organization? So when something happens at an organization and they might need to put a positive spin on something or squash something, how tightly are the media outlets connected with those PR individuals or those PR agents within an organization? Is that tighter than it has been in the past? Is that my gut tells me it probably is. It's probably a little more, the companies probably rely on that more to make sure things are shown in a positive light and the bad stuff doesn't get out. What's your
I
take on
think
that?
I think it depends on the organization. If the organization has already been reported on poorly in the past, it doesn't matter if it's been at, like, different newses, right? Um, they are very actually non-friendly with reporters, and they don't want anything to slip out, or they don't want their name at all in the media. If they're strategically, if they try to, like, I guess, partner with the media or have a healthy relationship, our job is supposed to be that we're not supposed to have a bias no matter who they are. Like, if they do a scandal, we're going to report on it, which is very threatening. So a lot of organizations, there's not very strong connections, if you can say, because what's important to them is their image, and they'll protect that image at all costs.
Okay, so going back, you were talking about education, and you're saying that experience is probably a little more important than having a specific degree in journalism or writing or communications or what have you. So, if someone doesn't have a formal a university education, and they're just relying on experience, what is the best experience they can get to leverage to get themselves into a position such as yours?
Honestly, community work. knowing the community, because as journalists, you get to know the community very, very well. Like you get to know what's happening in the community, all the events. So, um, even being a part of the community organizations or events, that helps because um, you're able to connect with those people better because you have that relationship already in place. So they're able to trust you a little more. Sometimes, as a journalist, you want to protect your relationships with certain individuals, or else you will not be able to get certain opportunities. Like, for example, if you have a tight connection with an officer or someone above, it's really good because they'll trust you more. And but if you break that relationship or do something that they didn't like, oh, you know, but that's hard because as a journalist, you're not always in charge of what gets published. You just write it, but your editor can throw things in or spin things in a certain way, and then but your name's on that, right? So
I can't remember if you mentioned this in the beginning or if this was before we started recording, but we talked very, very briefly about social media. How is the role of social media playing in what you do?
it has a big effect, especially in Canada, because there's been a ban on news. Like we cannot have our news on Facebook or Instagram or certain places. So we could actually only really share it on TikTok. So a lot of Canadian news outlets have been TikToking a certain story, leave it at a cliffhanger, and it's like, hey, if you want to hear the rest, come to our website.
Interesting, interesting. So it's more like driving traffic back to your website there. Okay, so Stephanie, you're also a writer. So let's dive into that a little bit. So you have, I believe you said 3 books, correct?
That's
Okay.
correct.
So let's talk about those. Let's talk about, well, one thing I'd like to ask whenever I'm speaking to an author, are you self-published? Did you go through a traditional publisher or are you a mixture of both? What is that like for you?
So I'm a mixture of both. I was published through Reading Dream Press. It's technically I co-own Reading Dream Press. So I was published through there just because it gives a little more opportunities as as far as that goes. Yeah, and like you said, I have 3 books out. My first book that was released, I worked on it for over 20 years. And it's a historic fantasy.
I'm going to come back to that in a second. I want to talk about their publishing house.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've heard a couple people talk about this on the show, but I haven't had an opportunity to really dive into that. So why create a publishing house? Why did you go down that road?
It provides more quality of a product, if that makes sense. Like when someone reads, like, I guess, like, again, publishing is changing too, right? Where a lot more indie authors are rising up, but traditionally, the reason people were scared to go indie is because, like, people thought indie was the cheapest route when it isn't actually. It's actually more expensive route. But people don't realize it until they go down that route, I guess. But you like some authors try to cheap out, like they won't hire editors or they'll get like great Auntie Sue to like edit, or something. And um it's not always the best. Like there can be mistakes, but I mean, even with traditional publishing, you're never going to find perfection. There's always going to be some sort of mistakes. But still, like, your aim is to make a quality product as far as editing, presentation, formatting, and cover design. So it's easier to do that in a business and also profit a little more than on your own.
So having your publishing house, that also gives you the opportunity to bring on other authors and then publish their books as well, correct?
And technically, yes. Although because my publishing company is so new, where I'm sticking mainly to my books and also some other people that I'm have close relationships to that I know their work is uh worth investing, if that makes sense. I'm not like once we expand bigger, I will probably open the doors for other people with opportunities, but for now I'm kind of sticking to a close-knit circle.
So how does that work when you're actually like going to print with the books? Do you have, I assume you have to source your own vendors. I'm guessing Amazon KDP, you're not using that at all. What is that manufacturing process like, for lack of better words for you?
A lot of publishing houses now are using Amazon and Ingram Sparks and KDP. because it's gotten so big that you're kind of missing a big bulk of money if you don't.
Fascinating. Okay, so
So the only the really huge companies like Penguin House or something like that, well, even them, they go through Ingram Sparks, which is like Amazon. So like you're gonna miss out. Like a lot of the bigger houses are realizing they're missing out if they don't, because Amazon and Ingram Sparks have kind of taken over like the publishing industry, that they're missing a huge chunk by not going through them. So most people do that.
okay, that makes sense. I assumed that KDP was more for like that the the individual, the small person just trying to like, like I wrote a book, like that kind of a thing. And if it blows up, awesome. I didn't realize that. It seems like what you're saying, that's almost like if you want your book on Amazon at all, like it seems like that might be the gateway.
The best route to go is you try to get it out to as many platforms as possible, because that's the same, like that's what publishing companies do, right? Like Ingram Sparks sells to bookstores and also to libraries and stuff in schools. Amazon is just to your public, and then there's Barnes and Nobles. You want to get it to as many platforms as possible, chapters, Indigo, places like that. Like that's the goal, right? You want your book everywhere. You want awareness. That's the whole fight, right?
Marketing your book alongside your publishing house. I'm assuming I think I know the answer to this, but when you're marketing that alongside your publishing house, does that give the book more clout because it's like you're the publishing company, like this is a book I'm trying to pitch to schools, libraries, bookstores, whatever, as opposed to, Stephanie calling and saying, "Hey, I have this book that's available. Can I get it in your store?"
When you basically make your own publishing house, you have a team of people helping you, right? So it's not just, you're not as alone as you would just as an indie author. So I have my publicist, Mickey, right? And then I have, and he also kind of does a little bit of the marketing element as well, but you have a marketer, you have, there's so much that you can't, it's really hard to do it just as one individual, unless you're lucky enough that you hit the rhythm just right and you blow up, right? Which is very rare. You have to, sometimes it's a fluke, right? Like winning the lottery a little bit. It can be.
Sticking on this just the hair longer.
Mhm.
Creating the publishing house, how many extra hoops you have to go through aside from starting a business? Or is it basically just because it's a type of business, it's just you create a business and it's done? Or are there other hoops you have to go through?
I mean, you create a business, you want a website, you want a logo. It depends how serious you want to be taken, right? If you really want to go far, then go all out. If you don't, then you're just another person floating around. You also want to, like here in Canada, you have to like create a certain account so you can access a lot of like numbers for the book, like identification numbers for your books, right?
Now, Stephanie, I am running a little short on time, but one thing I like to do is whenever I'm speaking with someone, I like to give them the opportunity to talk about a project they're working on, a cause they believe in. If you want to talk more about your books, we didn't get a chance to really talk much about them, but whatever you like to talk about, floor is yours.
My whole purpose of writing, my whole passion really comes for making a difference in someone's life. So that is my goal, like towards my books. Like whether someone is going through the moment or forgetting their own identity, because I feel like sometimes we get so caught up in life that we don't realize, our own identity, or it's easy to forget that. So that's really what my books focus in on, is kind of waking people up to a little bit of who they are and what they need to be doing, right? And just helping them to remember actually history, because like we cannot know who we are unless we know our roots. And I feel like if you forget your history, or you try to manipulate that history and change what reality was, then you're in danger of forgetting who you are, and you're in danger of repeating mistakes that were made. So that's my whole thing, is I'm really hope with anything I write, there's a purpose, there's a lot of symbolism, and I hope it makes a difference in people's lives.
That is awesome. So what I'll do is I'll make sure I get all those links from you for your website, for your book. So when people are trying to find out all the information and trying to find you, they can easily do that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Stephanie, it's been absolutely awesome having you on Time We Discuss. We learned what it's like being a reporter, being an author, creating a publishing house, all kinds of great things. It's been great having you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.